hello to Thomas and to Jacob.
Hello.
Hello.
Yay.
Got better lighting here. Now I have good lighting.
All right, you guys. So the first thing that I have to do, I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna also try to Facebook Live us. So here we go. Let me see. I don't know if I can do this. Oh wait, no, that's not what I wanted to do. I want a Facebook Live. Discard and hold on.
You're good.
Live. There it is. Okay. Are we good? Look at you guys. Look. Okay, we're going live. Woo. Hello, everybody. All right. So this is live from New York.
Saturday night.
It's Saturday night.
Jacob's from New York. Live from New York.
Okay, everybody. So this is Thomas Miller and Jacob Major, and we are in a session, a relatively quick session and fun session, just about performance practice and about Gilbert and Sullivan and physical comedy, and how all of that pertains to what we see currently on Broadway and in theaters. So we are Facebook Living in this moment, which is a brand new venture, doing WebEx and Facebook Live at the same time. So we'll see how that goes. I also need to say before we get started talking that this is a Humanities Texas sponsored event. And I cannot express enough how grateful I am and how grateful the music department, Lone Star College Tomball, how grateful we are to Humanities Texas being willing to invest in our students and our community, even at this time. And we've really been able to do some interdisciplinary study, and it's been a neat semester filled with sessions that really supplemented and complemented what people are studying and also what the community would like to be able to do in time of COVID, if all of that makes sense. So thank you, Humanities Texas. Okay, you guys, how are you doing? How's it going?
We're doing great.
It's good.
Yay. Well, let's jump right in. So can you tell me just a little bit about how you got started in musical theater? Was it theater or music that, was sort of the precursor to that or that got you started? And what was it about the genre of musical theater that, I don't know, intrigued you?
I'll let Jacob go.
I go first? Okay.
Put you on the spot.
I think I was 5 or 6 when my mom and my dad were like, hey, there's the Methodist church in town is doing like a church camp, like drama camp thing. So they just kind of stuck me in that. And I had a great time, but I didn't really know what was going on. I just knew that it was fun and I liked being on stage in front of people. Sort of. I mean, it was like scary, but I was like, this is kind of fun. I want to try this again. And then actually CYT, Christian Youth Theater, came into Houston, and Thomas and I met each other through that.
Yeah.
But as soon as I think it was 2006. So I was like 10 when they came.
Wow.
But
we've known each other for definitely like 13 years maybe now.
Yeah, a long time ago, 13, 14 years ago. But I did their first summer camp, which was a very, very shortened production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And that kind of hooked me on musical theater. And I was like, whoa, I can't believe that there's an art form where you get to sing and dance and act at the same time. Whoa, this is crazy. And I think a lot of it was the camaraderie I had. My brother did it with me. I met some really cool friends through it. So a lot of it was kind of having a group of people that I enjoyed hanging around. But then that naturally progressed into me loving the art form and really enjoying kind of training in it and bettering my skills. And that kind of led to, in high school, I was taking more dance classes. I was taking voice lessons. And I kind of decided, hey, I think I would like to do this with my life if possible. And at that point, my parents were not fully on board. They were very much about me doing it as a hobby during high school, but they were kind of like, maybe for college, you should study something like business that you can use down the road. But my dad met with a mentor when I was 16 or so, who basically told him like, hey, your son has what it takes should he pursue this further. He kind of has like the raw talent that it might take to have a career in this. And so that's kind of what my dad needed to fully be like, all right, I would be willing to pay or help, support you with college tuition for a musical theater program, which is not everyone's path. A lot of people that pursue this and are on Broadway and are successful don't go to school for this at all. But I do think everyone who pursues this pursues training in some way, whether that be individual classes on their own or like a full-fledged BFA program. But I do think training is really important, and I think that, I mean, Thomas and I think would both say like training, until you're done with the career is important. Like you never want to stop training, and I struggle with like, I graduated in 2018, and so I've been out for a little over 2 years now. And it's hard for me to be like, you know what, I should still go to dance class. I should still take a voice lesson every now and then. I need to kind of keep my skills sharp. But it's hard because you're in your head, you're like, but I just got through this, 4-year program. Doesn't that make me a professional? It's like, it makes you, better at what than you were 4 years ago. But you still have a lot of work to do and a lot of growing to do. So I guess I'm saying I'm still on that journey. But it's been a fun ride so far.
Yes. That's so good. Yep, everything he just said.
Thomas, I think you muted yourself.
Myself.
Okay.
I was going to say.
Did you that? So sorry. What I was saying was, I like how Lisa framed the question about, how did you get into theater? Because everyone, it's so fascinating to hear how everyone falls into it. Sometimes it's like falling in love and you just kind of fall into it. But definitely for me, I feel like growing up, and I know this was Jacob's experience too, we had music just around us growing up. And so I almost feel like music to me was like, oh, this was something that I just was kind of introduced to at a really young age. And then I just kind of naturally, I appreciated it and I knew a lot about it. And then for me, that's kind of around the same age as Jacob, when we first started to do that extra like theater activity that we were first introduced to, that everyone can remember their first time. That's what it's all about. That passion, that first time, you're like, oh, I've never done something like this before. And I always tell people, you have to remember why you started to do theater. That will get you through the hard times when you are, as Thomas Edison said, it's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And it's so true. And I've seen Jacob, I've seen how hard he's worked and everything. So basically, I would say I started with like, oh yeah, I knew music, but then the magical thing about musical theater was it was the first time I could incorporate my musical skill, but then now I'm playing character. And so when that was kind of introduced, just like Jacob said, it was like, whoa, this is just this whole new world. And yeah, definitely. So, but I didn't do theater till I was 13. And then once I was 13, I decided this is what I want to do. Like around 14 or 13, when I first started, I was like, oh, this is like what I love to do more than anything else. So shouldn't that be what I do? And so then there was that whole journey of, like me and Jacob went to a 4-year school because, like he said, it's about training. It's about working hard. You can't just like riff your face off and be like, oh, I can riff really, really great. Now I'm done. And then, okay, well then what happens if you don't get that one riffing role that you auditioned for? And then you have the audition for the other role of the harmonizer in the group. And then you don't know how to harmonize. How are you going, so there's all these other different skills, all these things that you have to work hard at, the things that you might not be natural at. Everyone has that natural thing they're good at in theater. Everyone has that one skill. But just like Jacob said, it's about getting the training, but then you have to apply it, and you have to work hard wherever you are. And so a lot of people will ask, what's the best school to go to? And I think we can all agree it's more about what you do and how you use your time at where you are than where you go. It's more about how you invest yourself into it and how you give yourself to, and how you take the opportunities at the school. Because one of my favorite experience at Texas State, for example, in San Marcos, Texas, and I know Lisa knows Caitlin, and they've had master classes together and all of that. And one of my best experiences there was Caitlin said, hey, you should go audition. There's a vocal group on campus. And all of a sudden I was learning how to listen there, tools I was getting there that were helping me in musical theater, but it was technically outside my major. So there's always something else to learn that will help. And yeah, that's the end of my rant. But that's where I come from. And after school, I did the Finding Neverland tour. If anyone has heard of that show, it's about how Peter Pan became Peter Pan. And then now I'm here in Orlando, Florida at Disney. Jacob's in New York.
Yay! All right, so the scope of our Humanities Texas grant, it was all about studying Gilbert and Sullivan, which, you know, is a sort of 19th century art form, physical comedy, unique genre of singing and theater, and maybe finding some threads that are continuous from 19th century physical comedy to even modern day contemporary musical theater. So I wanted to ask you about that. How do you guys approach just even the idea of physical comedy, sort of farcical comedy? What do you think is important? What needs to be in the body? How do you approach a role or a song or a part that is nuanced with physical comedy?
Do you want to go, Jacob, or should I?
Sure, I'll go first.
No, it's okay if I go first too. I keep kind of putting Jacob on the spot.
So typically, like with the kinds of roles I've played, I haven't gotten to play many roles that are high in the physical comedy spectrum. Usually, the kind of stuff I play is going to be more of like a teenager in like a contemporary musical, or a dancer in a more traditional musical, something like that. So I haven't actually done a lot of stuff like this, but I do remember in college, I did a number from Pirates of Penzance, which is
right. Yeah, you told me you were working on it. You've worked on it, yeah, at school.
Yeah. We did Cat Like Tread, or with Cat Like Tread from that show, which is super fun. And while we did somewhat take it out of context because it was for Grand Night, which is our big review at Elon, where they kind of encourage you to like take a number and make it funny or make it different, kind of have a new approach, which is kind of a fun choreographic, or from a director or choreographer standpoint, can be fun to kind of mess around with the number. But we actually kept that number pretty consistent with the way it was normally done. I think that I didn't direct it or anything, but the director of the number looked at a lot of old videos of the show, and I just remember we were very much encouraged to have like stiff, like your posture has to be very good. You move with these kind of stiff, sharp movements. It's kind of like funny because your whole body, it's rather than being super subtle like other forms of comedy, this kind of comedy is very broad and big, with like, it's like painting wide strokes versus like these little things. Like it's not like a close up on your face. It's very much like your body is the thing expressing the comedy. So everything we did was just very over the top and extra. And if you saw it in a contemporary musical, you'd probably be like, that's kind of stupid. That isn't funny in this context. But in the context of Pirates of Penzance, and especially back in all of those shows were written from like 1871, I think, through the end of the 90s, the 1890s. So I mean, that was back in a time where comedy was not subtle. Comedy was not small. It was very much like over the top, grandiose. So I would say it's all about like your posture. You want to look and walk like people, like straight up tall. Like no one slumped back then. People were in corsets and everything was pulled up. And then with comedy, it's just about kind of like using big movements. And I think vocally too. I mean, I'm not a voice teacher by any means, but it would be weird to kind of take Gilbert and Sullivan out of the traditional vocal style. I don't think I would want to hear it done with like a contemporary styling,
Well, I mean, if you think about their intent, right, they were kind of making fun of grand opera. So, so there's an expectation that, you're going to hear legit singing, which is interesting. The farcical comedy and the legit singing, I think, is part of the humor.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Because it's all a satire on Great Britain, and they're like, the Mikado is set in Japan, but it's really like talking about great. It's like this light, loose setting of another country so that they can then make fun of everything about British politics, British institutions, all of these things. And so it's kind of like, you're right. I think so much of it, of the comedy, is the way that they speak and sing and the way that it should sound prudish and sort of like over the top.
It's just, yeah, that reminds. It's just like how Urinetown is set in
Yeah.
Urinetown, but like we all know what it's about. You know,
Right.
it's a commentary on our government, or you know, whatever it is. We have similar like ideas. We still have that same kind of comedic approach, I feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's definitely basically everything Jacob just said about the physical comedy. The physical comedy, and I think it's important for especially students right now who are like, you know, maybe you're 19 or maybe you're learning all these different styles, you're learning how to approach different kinds of pieces of art. You have to know the background, you have to study it. You can't just think that you can go sing a song and you haven't even seen a show of theirs yet, or you know what I mean. You won't know how to do it if you don't actually immerse yourself in that world. And so another important thing to remember is you have to remember that acting is acting. Acting is pretending. It's not. Some people, they feel like, well, but I don't feel like a 19th century, you know, scullery maid. It's like, you don't have to feel like a 19th century scullery maid. What you have to do is do your research, and you have to become an expert at communicating and pretending that you are that to an audience. And so the brilliant skilled actors are the ones that know that it's mechanical. It's mechanical. Watch Ian McKellen do anything, you know, and those kind of great English actors even that know how to approach different styles, because they know that they know that it's not necessarily like, oh, I have to be the character. Yeah, you have to communicate to the audience, but it's take the pressure off yourself to feel like all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and it's 1871. Like, you know, you're pretending. So you have to get really skilled at the skill of, it's just like any other character. You have to pretend to be that character, pretend to be them, and use all the skills and tools you know how to portray someone else who's not yourself. You're not actually them. You have to use those skills and those tools you've learned to. And one more thing, speaking of that, Oklahoma, for example, I think is another, or, you know, Showboat, the first musical, like Lisa's saying, it goes opera, and then I feel like operettas started to get a little closer to musical theater, and then Showboat, right, was like, oh, this is something a little bit different, and it was huge. And so, or even Oklahoma, when you take that musical from 1941, and you take a musical like that, and you would not play a character in Oklahoma the way you would play a character in Next to Normal, you know, for example, because it's simply a different style. It's from a different time. So I feel like a lot of those rules that apply to when singers know how to, oh wait, now I'm singing, I could have danced all night. You know what I mean? I could have danced. There has to be that shift. You know, there has to be that shift of, now I'm honoring something from a different time period, and I need to do the research. I need to immerse myself in the world so that I can play pretend and be this character and fool the audience into thinking that I am this person. So
Yeah. And
So
I think
here's-
also what a great resource. Like 15 years ago, we didn't have YouTube. Now
Yeah.
you can
Right.
literally look through all the archival footage of all of these shows, and you can see how people did it in the West End, on Broadway. You can watch the movie versions of. There's a lot of movie versions of Gilbert and Sullivan works as well. So it's like there really is no excuse if you're ever cast in a role like that, or if you have to sing a song, you know, for a recital or something, to not. It only take 30 minutes. You can watch several versions of the same thing, and then you can borrow. Like, acting is also all about borrowing from people that you're influenced by and saying, how did they do it, you know? Because trust me, like, none of us are ever going to be a fully finished master of, you know, we all have to borrow from everyone
each other,
else.
yeah.
So I think YouTube's a great resource for that.
So how do you guys view the old stuff? I mean, do you, and I am using that term really loosely, right? From Gilbert and Sullivan to Showboat to Oklahoma that you've already referenced. Are these museum pieces? Are they relevant? How does that knowledge of or sense of how theater developed influence what you do as a contemporary musical theater interpreter?
Yeah, I mean, I, I, I believe that is one of the benefits of training and getting an education even more formally for theater, is that it's what Lisa's talking about, is honoring what's come before you. Because to us it might feel, and it does feel perhaps archaic, but I almost feel like I almost it's so dumb, but I almost feel like the answer would be yes and or both, because you do want to honor it. You do want to honor it as this is this special thing, almost like a museum piece that happened. But then the second part of that is, once you realize that, and you honor it by studying it, by researching it, and look at what it did in this time and all of those things, there does have to come a point. So I think it's a balancing act, because there does have to come a point where now you have to play the character, and now you have to find, how do I bring myself to the character? So my honesty and my idea and beliefs about the character, and my perspective on the character and who they are in their story, and how am I going to be different from the last person that played this role? So how can I make it honest now and find the honesty in the story? And that simply goes back to the basics of performing, and the basics of that Lisa teaches all the time. And it goes back to those basics that you have to have of performing in any opera, and then the basics of acting, which is, what does the character want here, and what's going on in the scene, and then you can bring yourself to it. So I would say it's a little bit, I would say it's almost a little bit of both, depending on the production you're in. But definitely there definitely has to be both. I'm honoring this, paying homage to this, but I'm also going to bring myself to it and find a way to, how can I honestly bring myself to the work now, and all of my beliefs, and who I am as a person, and my body and my voice, and now I'm going to try to lend it to this style in the way that, and that goes along with finding out who you are as a performer and your perspective, which I feel like getting training really helps you to do as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think we see this happen all the time. Not as much with Gilbert and Sullivan as with like Cole Porter, with Rodgers and Hammerstein, Irving Berlin. They're taking these shows, they're putting up these revivals. Kiss Me Kate had a revival. Anything Goes had a revival. Carousel had a revival, and oftentimes they're trying to do kind of what Thomas said. They're making it a museum piece, but then the director is specifically there, especially with this most recent Oklahoma revival. I think is the most drastic thing, where they just completely change the vibe. Right? It's like
Right.
the setting looks different. They're serving chili and cornbread at intermission. It's like they're trying to make it this slightly different thing, but still, obviously, none of the lyrics have changed. Like they're doing the show lyrically, like everything is the same. It's just that they're updating things. You also see this in a lot of theater programs. They'll take Shakespeare and they'll set it either in a futuristic time period or in a current time period, and then it's like it's kind of confusing as an actor to figure out, okay, well then how much do I pay homage, and how much do I like make this
Right.
completely different, especially with rhyme schemes and stuff. And I think with like Cole Porter and Irving Berlin, those guys were totally influenced by Gilbert and Sullivan. It's like if you look at their lyrics, if you look at their melodies,
Just the wit.
that's practically operetta with just a couple notches closer to musical theater. Just it's like 60 years later or 50 years later, whatever the time might be. So the wording might be different, but think about what those guys would have been listening to as like little kids. Probably
That's
Gilbert
a really interesting connection, actually, moving from Gilbert Sullivan to Cole Porter, and it's the use of text that is a real connective tissue there. That's something to explore in the future. You've just given me an idea. The neurons are firing.
It's very much about like the rhyme scheme and about the wording, and it's so clever, and you don't find that nowadays. Nowadays, it's all about these like soaring contemporary musical theater ballads, which are great and beautiful, but it's not about being clever anymore. I think it's more about this like gritty, like honest, like it's just a different style, and it's not better or worse. It's just
more like, yes, it's definitely more like it's almost more like the character's the star now, more than the brilliant genius writer behind it. But I feel like Hamilton would be an exception in a lot of ways, because even though it's rap and hip hop, that's probably one of the closest things to Gilbert and Sullivan, like
Oh,
in
how
terms of just the
interesting.
modern
Yeah,
musicals. You know what I mean? It sounds crazy, but the wit and the humor and the speed and the satire and the making fun of America right now through the old America, you know, and so there's just so many layers there. But yeah, something popped into my head. You know what popped into my head while you guys were talking about that? Uh, what is it called? A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. You guys have heard
Yes.
of that musical?
Yeah.
Yes.
It just popped in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, like
It's
it's
kind
so
of that
fast. It's so
mhm,
right? It's so
that legit singing
legit
and the
singing.
text and that's interesting too.
Legit singing
Um,
lots of words. Like, I mean, if someone's really good at Gilbert and Sullivan, they're probably going to be really great at A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder musical just because it's that style,
Yeah.
right?
so talk to me about realism when you are in these kind of larger than life or farcical or unreal circumstances. Like how do you as an actor make those choices and as a singer make those choices in the parameter of realism when the situation is unreal? Do you have a process you go through or a way you think about that?
No easy questions today. No easy.
Oh,
We are diving in.
I think it's just coming down to your intention, because like if you boil it real like if you boil down the crazy circumstances that the player the musical might be in, and you just boil it down to what is my intention in this one little moment, and you can kind of like condense it, then all you're doing is you're getting what you want as a character. You're going for what you want always. As people, that's what we're always doing. We're walking through life, we're walking through the stage, trying to achieve our goals, our little goals that are moment by moment, as well as like our bigger objective throughout our entire journey. And then once you find out like what your little goal is for this little scene or this moment or this beat, it could even be just like a phrase in a song, then you can find, okay, how would I play that right now, just talking to you guys over Zoom, and then how can I like magnify that and amplify that to then play as big as, Gilbert and Sullivan and Gentleman's Guide, where you're literally, it is farcical because you're just, it's so over the top. So I think it's still taking those little tiny intentions that they might be so subconscious because they're so small. And then it's just like making that bigger, seeing how it makes your body move, and then just making that happen even in a more grandiose way. But I honestly just think it still comes from the same little seed of what do I want right now in this moment, and then how can I make that just like massive, even to the point where I get a laugh, because it seems so silly in a way.
Right. I think that's such a great point. That's and yeah, the only thing I would add is like what you just said at the end when you're like, it almost seems silly. I feel like as performers, and this is also something that I feel like I really did learn in a college setting when I was training, and regardless of where you're training, wherever you are, where you're trusting your teacher and you're training, you're learning how to honor the text or honor the author of the text. You're learning, how do I honor this in the greatest way possible and take it as seriously as possible, because like what Lisa's saying is, well, this is a parody and it's heightened and or like Jacob keeps saying, it's grandiose, and it is. And then oh, where was I going with that? Yeah. So, and then in the process of getting that education and doing that, like you have to be willing to take it seriously. So you have to take the character seriously, take it all seriously. Yes, it's a comedy. But the most brilliant actors are the ones that can do comedy because they're still taking their job seriously. And like Jacob was saying, like it might look a little silly and you might feel silly or you might feel strange doing something you're not used to doing because we don't do it nowadays. But you have to be willing to take a moment and just say, this might look very silly to a bystander, but this is what the work is requiring of me, and I have to take this seriously. it's like the dichotomy of deciding to pursue theater because you have to be willing to take everything about it seriously and dedicate yourself to it. So even though it may be a comedy and the audience should be uh, laughing, even it's almost harder when it's a comedy because then there's that expectation that they're going to enjoy themselves and you have that even more pressure. So you have to take it, you just have to take the text and the characters seriously enough to, like Lisa said, once you're heightening it and you're in that world, you're in that style, you can't break and start laughing at yourself and oh my goodness, this makes me feel uncomfortable. It's like, no, you need to take it seriously and realize that this is the work, this is what's been created, and this is what someone literally spent their life to do, and this is one of the results of it. So you're honoring it by that. This is what theater is. That's what theater literally is. There's no art form like it, because that's what we do. We take our bodies, our voices, and our facial expressions, we take everything we can give, and then we put it on stage. And if you're not taking it seriously or not able to translate to different styles because it feels different, then you're not learning how to become more of that chameleon actor that you should be learning. Which education should always produce the result of, now you are more of a chameleon than you were yesterday.
Mhm.
Because now you're able to say, you know what, even though I don't talk like Shakespeare on my day-to-day basis, now I have an appreciation for it, and now I understand it more. And now, even though it might feel silly to do or to say, I'm taking it seriously, and so are my colleagues and my teachers teaching me how to honor it and take it seriously. So now we're going to trust each other. And someone in the audience might not get it if it's their first time watching Shakespeare, but hopefully they'll watch and they'll understand. Now they'll understand and be introduced to the works of Shakespeare or the works of Gilbert and Sullivan, or
Sure.
whatever it is that's far away from us now. So that's my little tidbit.
So, my friends, I so appreciate your time today. This has been a wonderful just discussion. I'm looking forward to being able to post it and having further discussions with students and community members about some of the things that you brought up. Do you have any parting thoughts or sort of in conclusion to folks who are looking at the material of Gilbert and Sullivan? Any just parting thoughts in terms of suggestions or recommendations or a great approach to that body of literature? Where should they start? Music or lyrics?
That's a good question.
That's good. I mean, for
That's a
Gilbert
really
and
good question.
Sullivan, I would say music. I would say learn from how Lisa is teaching you to sing in the proper ways that she's teaching you the technique of the opera technique and the vocal technique. I would say that has to come first, because I don't know how you could do Gilbert and Sullivan if you don't have that.
So vocal technique is important because it is legit singing. You're so right about that. And particularly in the female roles, they tend to take the ingenue voice. Yes, way.
They're too far. They're so high up there. Yeah.
Right. So you've got to be able to access different parts of the voice in different ways. So absolutely, I concur that technique is super important. Jake,
I think watching any sort of full length filmed version, there's a lot of, I think there are some. So I remember watching in college, we had an MT history class and we watched a filmed version of a stage production of Pirates or of Mikado. Or I think that they're even the Hot Mikado. That's sort of a a jazzy version. It's they're
how
taking.
funny.
Yeah, so I would say if you can get immersed in, not just look up a song, but actually watch the entire show and immerse
So that you
yourself in
understand the
full
style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like taking it out of context with one song isn't going to
It's
really
tough.
give you a full picture. It's going to give you this little parcel of information where you could have an entire, you could actually gain an appreciation. You could actually want to show this to other people because you enjoy it so much. Who knows? You might find that you really love the style if you watch the thing from beginning to end and kind of get a chance to not just see it as this archaic old thing that it had an important impact that isn't really meaningful anymore, and being oh, actually this is kind of funny, this is kind of
Right.
now I'm interested in British history, what was happening at the time, what were they talking about, like how did this translate to, because a lot, it's kind of like Shakespeare. There's a lot of phrases that I know that people in Britain are still using from Gilbert and Sullivan shows. It's kind of one of those things that so impacted the vocabulary of the time, the way that
Right.
people would speak to each other. So I think if you have an interest in history, it would really behoove you to like watch as much material as you can, and not just like little bits of it, but the full thing.
Some a broader context.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Both of those are great points. You guys, thank you so much. Thanks for being here, and thanks for talking. Questions? Does anybody have any questions? I know there are a few people with us. Any questions at all? Yay!
I did have
All right.
one more
Yes.
comment that I wanted to say. I just want to say, good for you, Lisa, for like expanding minds where you're teaching, because I know I keep saying like education is always about being a chameleon and being that, but see, that's what I see happening here is what you're teaching is the vocal technique, and now you're realizing, well, let's talk to people from different backgrounds who are more, more of that theatrical or drama background. And you're maybe you're working with people who are more musically minded that are now stretching themselves in that direction.
Right.
Which is so fascinating, because if I was speaking
It
to
all
students
speaks.
of theater, I would be trying to stretch them to your direction, Lisa. If they were approaching Gilbert and Sullivan, I would say, okay, but you have to have this legit singing. You have to get this down. So it's so awesome to see people when they're teaching and they're trying to expand and think broader about these things. And I think it's really it helps people be successful in their careers, because you never know where
Well,
they'll
it's
go.
so important. The emotion and the intent, it so impacts the quality of sound you get and how you use your instrument. So it all speaks, you guys. It's just so interconnected. Your understanding of the style and the period, and then your understanding of vocal technique and putting it all together for yourself, as you know, is so important. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. I am grateful. Yay. And yeah, we'll talk soon. I'm gonna let go of the Facebook Live.
All right.
And here we go. I'm going to finish that. All right, good. So we're off Facebook Live. And now I want to say one final thank you to Humanities Texas. And I am so looking forward to posting this discussion. And I know there's going to be a lot of folks who hear and see you and have thoughts on the basis of the recording that we post. And so I'm looking forward to that community dialogue as well. And now I'm going to stop the recording for WebEx. Here we go.
All right.